Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Dan Lewis. Dan is co-founder and CEO of Convoy, a digital trucking network that is transforming the trillion-dollar global trucking industry in service of its mission to transport the world with endless capacity and zero waste. Before Convoy, Dan served as general manager of new shopping experiences at Amazon after having product and data roles at Microsoft, Google, and various startups. After graduating from Yale University with a bachelor's degree in cognitive science, Dan started his career in supply chain and strategy consulting for Oliver Wyman, working in operations across Europe, Latin America, and the US. Welcome, Dan. Good to see you.
Hi, Shauna. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so glad that we made this happen. I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire, and I want to try to sneak in a lot of questions in here because I have so much to ask you. It's like insane. Okay. What would your friends from fifth grade, like what words would they use to describe you? 3 words.
Tall, goofy, and fast.
Oh, that was how they would have described you in fifth grade?
Probably fifth grade. Yeah. I mean, fifth grade's like, I feel like those
fifth
are
grade is,
qualities
is
that
that
matter.
10, 11?
Sports
Yeah.
and I don't know, your personality. I don't know. That's probably
Yeah. What was your first concert?
First one that I really remember kind of doing myself was REM.
Oh, that's a good one. Love it. And I know you're a traveler. So which country is on your bucket list?
I would love to go to India or China. I've never been to either. And I feel like they're so important. And so I've, met and spent time with so many people from those countries. And it's something I'd love to go see.
Yeah, me too. I've never been to either place. Okay. So Dan, if you could have any one superpower, what would it be?
I think about superpowers a lot. I think the 2 that I would want myself, or maybe just the one, I don't like the idea of flying because I feel like you'd just be a target. So I kind of want to teleport places. I think it'd just be cool to appear anywhere. Because sometimes I'm like, I'd really love to be on a beach right now. It'd be kind of nice to just be there for 5 minutes.
Mine is always teleporting 100%.
Yeah, that one sounds good. And maybe sleeping 1 hour and being like fully recharged. That'd be kind of nice.
Ooh,
I don't want to like
steal that
live
one.
forever because I think everybody else gets old and you kind of want to like go through the cycle of life, but it'd be nice to have like twice the life while you're here. I don't know.
Yeah. Or do all those things that you're like, if I had 48 hours in the day, I'd read more, I would whatever, exercise more. Yeah. I love those. If there was a book written about your life, what would it be called? I hate this question. I'm like so glad no one's ever asked me.
Man, what would it be called? Maybe probably just like not getting down. I don't know, just optimism. I feel like that's what's kind of defined me in many ways. Hopefully it'd be a witty, funny, sarcastic book.
Some sort of grit, something
just going, Yeah, exactly.
Keep it moving. What is your, I don't even know if you do this. Some people do and some people don't, but if you do, what is your karaoke go-to song?
I'm laughing because I'm remembering one that I did. So honestly, probably like something just like fun, like hip hop. The last one I did, Grant, my co-founder and I performed Thrift Shop by Malcolm.
Oh, nice.
But I rewrote it the night before to be Freight Shop, and I rewrote all the lyrics about trucking. So we had like a trucking performance.
That's amazing. I didn't even know that story. I just was like, I feel like he could probably get up there and do
Grant
something.
Grant can sing. No, Grant and Chris and Ferecki used to be at Convoy. They were the karaoke stars of Convoy. I was the one that kind of got up there and did it after a few drinks and did it with a group around me.
Like Grant can like sing, like legit good voice.
Yeah, Grant can sing. Grant did like Garth Brooks at one of at the Hard Rock when we did an event there, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago and did some karaoke.
Nice.
I think I did the remix to Ignition, which is a little different genre.
A little bit different. That's so good. I need to see all of this. Okay. What is your favorite way to stay in shape or exercise?
These days, I actually so I've been shooting hoops with my daughter after school and after work a bit. Normally it'd be running. My answer would be running or swimming or something like that, hiking. But I love basketball. I grew up playing basketball. She's 6 feet tall.
Your daughter is 6 feet tall?
Yeah, I have 2 daughters. One's 11. One just turned 13. So she was 6 feet when she was 12. She's left-handed. She's pretty athletic. So like,
holy shit.
Recently started getting into basketball and likes it.
Oh, she's going to crush it.
And so I've been like playing with her a bit after school, which is kind of my dream, like playing basketball with my kids. It's fun.
Yes. It's so funny because so many people extend their basketball. I know you're young, but we have friends who are my age, like 50 plus, and they're all just like, one is getting taken out one after the next from, it's always basketball because they play. It's one of those sports you're like, I can't be thinking like, oh, I got to slow it down with my age. And but play it while you can.
I feel like I got to sequence the sports. I've thought about this. I'm like, well, I can.
It's true. Like this is the phase of basketball. Let it rip right now.
Later on, it'll be more, golf, tennis, I don't know.
Yeah.
Curling.
So if you were competing in the Olympics, speaking of sports, which sport would you choose? Would it be basketball?
I mean, basketball would be fun to play. I love playing basketball. I just like the attitude of basketball. In the Olympics, though, I don't know, like, I guess summer or winter Olympics here. I'm going to go with
any Olympics.
We're doing it. I think it'd be cool to be good enough to compete in snowboarding, like half pipe snowboarding at the Olympics. That would just be awesome.
Do you snowboard right now?
Yeah, I snowboarded. I do snowboard. Not as much recently, but I've snowboarded every year since I was 16, 15. Even when I was a kid, there was a huge snowstorm in, I think 1996 in Seattle. I got stuck at my friend's house for a week. There was like 2 feet of snow, and his backyard opened up to Inglewood Country Club out in Kenmore. And so I learned to snowboard on like whichever of the holes that's really steep.
I've never tried it. It looks too hard, and I feel like that ship has sailed. I'm just trying to avoid injuries right now. Yeah. Have you ever done the behind the boat, like surfing?
Yeah, behind the boat? I've done wakeboarding. Surfing. I grew up in Seattle, and some of my friends here had boats, and we did the wakeboarding growing up.
Yeah, it's just such a huge craze right now. It's just gotten like ginormous.
Wakeboarding is super aggressive and hurts. You can mess yourself up if you're trying to do too much. Wake surfing is really relaxing.
Well, it is if you're talented at that type of thing. Okay, what are you currently reading, listening to, or watching that you'd recommend?
Watching wise, I've been watching The Mandalorian. I watched all the Marvel and Star Wars movies with my 2 daughters over COVID. So we've been watching some of the series now, which I think is really fun. Another book, which is a little bit more, which a lot of people have read, but I finished it recently. There's one called The King Killer Chronicle, which is like a really good kind of like fantasy book, which is super fun.
Yeah. So you said you grew up in Seattle, and I also read that you're one of 5. That's a big family.
Yeah, I'm one of 5.
Where are you in the birth order?
I'm number 2. So there's about 16, 17 years between the oldest and youngest in my family.
Wow.
We all, we're all friends, which is great. We all, hang out, which is actually really cool. It's funny when you have that much age gap, you don't ever hang out just the siblings, right? That never happens because either you're with other people in your family or friends or someone's kids. So I have 2 daughters. My older sister has 3 daughters, and my next brother down has a daughter and a son. So there's kind of a lot of kids running around at that age. And then I have 2 younger brothers after that.
That's so fun because your daughters can also be like built-in babysitters when your younger siblings start to have kids. Like that gap is so cool.
Yeah. And my sister is the oldest, and then I'm the oldest of 4 boys underneath her. And so
my gosh,
she's like the queen bee.
Oh yes. I need to meet her. I love her.
She's great. She actually lives in Seattle, works at Disney.
Nice.
And then, and her husband, I grew up with as well. They met a long time ago. So we kind of have a really cool group, but super spread out actually. And my parents, my dad was born and raised in Seattle. My mom grew up in Oregon. So a lot of Northwest.
Nice. So, and would you say that your siblings, if I asked them, tell me about Dan when he was little, would they be like, oh, of course he's like CEO of this crazy multi-billion-dollar valuated company? Like, is that what you were projected towards? Like, I've had so many people on the podcast. Some are like, oh no, I was like messing around when I was little. Others that were like, yes, had a paper route or whatever.
The paper route is definitely the problem. I bet there's some really strong correlation between whether or not you were like an organized paper deliverer.
Yes. Well, especially in Seattle, because it's like, that's a shit job. Like they're all rainy, nobody really wants, but just the I was working when I was little and I was industrious. Like I was focused on making money or
totally.
learning.
I was definitely like that. I was the backup paper route person that my sister would send me out on the route when she didn't have time to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was as glorious, but I definitely did the, lawn care business, My dad and uncle and a couple uncles worked at a company called Commercial Off Supply, which my grandfather had started. It was a small, have you ever seen the show The Office? It was similar to that.
Of course. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
I'm sure your daughters are watching that. My kids are obsessed.
Yeah. So it was similar to that, kind of like, in an office supply distribution company. So I spent my, summers building furniture, packing trucks, doing paperwork, delivering eventually around the Seattle area. So I worked a lot as a kid, and I guess people would have been like, yeah, Dan's probably going to like have his act together and go figure something out.
And were you a good student?
Yeah, I was a good student.
Into school, good focused on, what were your kind of, or maybe you don't have a sense of this. I'm always curious, especially asking this from the perspective of being a mom. What were your kind of family values? Like what was important to your family?
Things were really important to my family were that whatever, like honesty, like be honest, do the right thing or get caught if you do the wrong thing, and, own up to it and take responsibility. That was definitely a big part of it. I remember my mom would always say, she said two things to me a lot. One was just do well. My parents never pushed me to do anything specific. They were never like, you need to do this, or you need to work harder in school, or all like, you need to do this sport, or push me towards something. They just kind of said, whatever you do, you should just do it really well, which I liked in hindsight. And then my mom would always say, all right, well, if you ever do the wrong thing, I hope you get caught.
Oh,
go out and live your life, but like do the right thing. And if you don't, then get caught and learn from it. And I honestly felt like I had a really great kind of like set of values from my parents in those things. I feel like my parents were remarkably consistent. Like they just they lived what they said. I didn't see a lot of inconsistency, and I still don't, which is kind of as I was growing up, I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive. And, my mom was an ESL teacher. We had a lot of foreign families and refugees and immigrants living in my house growing up, and then students for years. And so I learned also a lot about like valuing other cultures, being really open to language and food and culture, and that, just giving people opportunities in this country was really important. And we did a lot of work to get people, to help them find jobs and get access once they came here from wherever they had come. And that definitely shaped me. I definitely grew up with a very, very much like a worldview. Yeah. And like believing that like, everyone deserves an opportunity. I didn't look down on people because they didn't speak English, well, or because they came from a different background or looked different. I just was always surrounded by people from different places. And I think that was one of the most powerful lessons my parents taught me. It also inspired me to go study abroad myself and learn another language.
I saw that you were in Chile, and then also it looked like you traveled a little bit in Spain and other areas, right?
Yeah.
Where did you study abroad?
I studied abroad in Chile.
Yeah.
In Valparaiso, which is kind of in the central district down there on the beach, which is nice. It was helpful to be living near the beach in a California-like climate, and it caused me to stay there for a year. Then after that, I ended up looking for opportunities to continue to use the language and engage, just experience different cultures. So I found work opportunities to go work in Barcelona.
Oh, so cool.
And then also to go live in Mexico City for a little while and working for the Panama Canal. So that's
incredible. I have to say, I studied abroad like for a semester, but to have like a full life experience is incredible. So as a Seattle guy, going to the East Coast, you ended up going to Yale. How did you choose Yale?
Yeah, I loved going to Yale, full stop. Like I felt like it was an incredible place to be. I made incredible friends there, wonderful opportunities. It was good to get out of my shell a little bit and go to another part. I'd never really been to the East Coast until I went to college.
Oh, interesting. A lot of New Yorkers, right? Yeah, a lot of New Yorkers, but people from all over the world. And, it was just, I hadn't done that much. It really opened my eyes. Right. But I certainly didn't grow up thinking I need to go to Yale. Right. And who exposed you? Who even exposed you? Did you have a college counselor or like your parents? Like, how did you even know to think about Yale? I'm trying to remember. So I was pretty competitive in a lot of things in high school. And I remember when I was looking at some different schools and I got into several different schools. I applied, I think, to 10 schools, honestly. I didn't quite know what I want. I honestly thought I was going to do film. To be honest. Super cool. Maybe that's your 2.3.0. That might be. I wanted to go
I love directing, producing, editing. I just love those aspects of it, the storytelling aspects of it. It's really the storytelling and being able to create something. And so I thought I wanted to go get into film. So I applied to USC, UCLA. I actually got into those schools. And then when I applied to, a couple schools in the Ivy League, they were both like Columbia and Brown and Yale. They all had a film aspect to them.
Right.
And so I thought I want to do that actually. And when I went to college, my first year, my student job was working for the director of undergraduate studies of film, as doing design work and marketing and stuff like that, and just being a helper to the film department. And I got really into that. And, the reason I ended up going to Yale though, was not specifically for film. I think if I would have been only focusing on that, I would have gone to UCLA or USC. I had a teacher in high school. His name was Mr. Burris. And I remember it was interesting. It's sometimes people say things to you in a way when you're young, you don't really understand what the trade-offs are and the decisions you're making. And I remember I was talking about some colleges I'd gotten into, and I mentioned I'd gotten to Yale. And he kind of looked at me and he was like, Dan, like, and that wasn't part of like my growing up thinking about going to the East Coast. That was a faraway place that I wasn't super interested in. But he was like, look, you got to think about this. Like, you're going to have a great experience anywhere you go. You can be successful going to any school. It doesn't really matter. And eventually, who you are is going to come out. But there are certain opportunities you might only get at certain schools, or that might open doors for you. There's like an option there. So if you get a chance, there's potential upside, very little downside. And, if you do choose to go down a path where going to a school like Yale really helped, it's an option. So he was like, you really should go there. It's like,
that's awesome. Are you in touch with this guy, with Mr. As you said, Mr. Burris?
Yeah, I haven't been in touch with him as much. I tried to get back in touch at one point. Been in touch with some people from high school.
I do love the stories of teachers, and it's so important to consider, like, what are our kids hearing from their teachers? Hopefully they're positive things, or, if they need a little kick in the ass, hopefully it's that too.
It really is.
Teachers can really have incredible impact.
They can, it's what helps, I think, also when you're going through things. A lot of people give you advice and thoughts and they're like, hey, here's some input. But at that age, it's really hard to like process the trade-offs. It helps when someone's like, I'm really going to tell you something strongly right now. Like, you can really think about this.
Yeah, this, if you don't hear anything, hear this.
Yeah, I remember when I was graduating from Yale, my dean, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'd come back from Chile. I had one option to go become a Spanish teacher and one option to go into management consulting, which are completely different.
Oh my God, it's like apples to oranges.
Apples to oranges. And I'm like, but I love Spanish. And I just lived in Chile for a year and I love teaching. I think it'd be really fun. And the other one, I like business, and I had a whole business mind as well. And I remember my dean gave me some incredibly good advice. He goes, look, if you don't know which one you want to do, pick the one that lets you do the other one if you're wrong. And I was like, oh, what does that mean? He's like, well, if you go become a Spanish teacher
that is amazing.
It was really helpful. He goes, if you become a Spanish teacher, that's wonderful. And I know you like teaching and you like Spanish, so you'll probably really enjoy it. But if you then 3 years later decide you want to do management consulting, it's very hard to go from that role to that role. But if you go start the management consulting track and you try to get some projects in Latin America and you continue your Spanish, it's not hard to go from there to becoming a Spanish teacher, because that door is open in the future from different entry points.
Yes.
And
great advice.
Exactly. These moments of advice people hand off, like that is why I went and did it. Like, I remember very clearly walking out of that meeting thinking, that was really smart. I'm going to do that.
And you also weren't entitled, and you were listening, which is half of it also.
Yeah, I guess
seeking information from people who have had a little bit more experience. Interesting. Oliver Wyman was actually a client of mine when I was recruiting in New York. Great firm. That's a really cool. So obviously you went the management consulting route.
Yeah, I went the management consulting route. And, I ended up also getting to do the summer after college and the summer after that, I was able to lead trips with kids in the outdoors. Like, there's a group called Adventure Treks. It's where you take a group of maybe 15, 16 kids on a 4-week adventure, backpacking, river rafting, climbing, sea kayaking, kind of like Outward Bound is the more.
How old are these kids? And are they kids that are just seeking connection to the outdoors? Or are they kids that need a little bit of like,
the programs range from 12 to 17 years old. Usually the kids are within 1 to 2 years of each other on the trips. And it can be a range, but honestly, a lot of the kids going on it were there because they were excited about the experience. It was fun. And there's a lot of leadership development, but that let me scratch my itch of kind of teaching and engaging and developing people. And I still look for opportunities to do that. But I am really glad I did the management consulting track. I was able to scratch the Spanish itch as well by going to these countries and working in Mexico and Spain.
Yeah. I'm sure you've kept up your Spanish, right?
Más o menos.
I mean, it must be helpful with work because you're dealing with people, probably speaking a lot of different languages, the drivers and the shippers, just everybody at work. Do you ever use your Spanish at Convoy?
Not very much these days. We have a Latinx group, and I've at some points gone and spoken in Spanish, and they've been gracious.
What gives you huge credibility. You're like, here I am.
But like I did in the early days, I was the only person at Convoy that spoke Spanish up till maybe we were 25 or 30 people, I think. And
yeah, it's super cool.
I did have phone calls with truck drivers that only spoke Spanish. And one thing I'm really proud of is, especially growing up in a home where ESL was really important. And I grew up in a home where, immigrants and refugees coming to this country was viewed as a really positive thing and something we needed to support and develop. That was part of our history as a country and the opportunity of the United States and the American dream. And so I love that Convoy is really good for first generation immigrants in ESL because you don't have to get on the phone. One thing we found from our truck drivers is it can be intimidating when English is your second language and you're on the phone negotiating with a broker back and forth. And if you're at a language disadvantage, you can miss things and it can be harder to negotiate that. And so because we can lay everything out cleanly in an app, it's easy to see and read, and you can negotiate via the app and you can pick the job via the app without having to be on a heated discussion with somebody. It's advantageous if you.
Oh, it's huge. So I'm excited. There's so many questions I have about Convoy, and it's incredible to watch what you've built over the last, I guess we're in 2022, almost 7 years, right? It's crazy. But you had, of all the people I've had on the podcast, like you've worked for some of the big guys. I mean, you've got the management consulting route. Sounds like you just decided to completely pivot and go the tech route. I'm curious how you made the decision to make that change and who was giving you advice at that point?
Yeah.
That's my first question. And then I want to get into like the culture of Google, Amazon, Microsoft.
Okay. I always wanted to be in tech. So I knew that was I didn't know if teaching or consulting or something was going to be the first thing I kind of did in my career coming out of college, but I knew that technology was always really interesting to me. So I was the kid who was 10 years old when my dad brought home an IBM XT computer from his office and just let me play with it. And I was getting on the internet before there was when it was all just text with my 2400 baud modem through the King County Library system.
These stories are so rich. Like, how are we going to have our kids like this?
I hacked and just played with my computer and taught myself stuff for years. And then I became, my job was help other people with their computers. And in college, I had kind of the help other people get their technology going job as well. And anyway, that's that. I just loved that. And I remember growing up in Microsoft town in Seattle. I remember reading about Microsoft when I was a kid in the newspaper and thinking that it was really amazing. So I always had this desire to I thought tech was cool. And I felt like it opened the door. Like the fact that I could get on the internet when I was 11 or 12 and I remember that the first hack I found was you could go on the King County Library system or the Seattle Library system and you could order whatever movies because they let you check out movies from the library. So I would go on there and order 15 movies and they would just mail them to my house and I'd have 15 VHS tapes that I could, and my parents were like, what are you doing? And I'm like,
yeah, I was going to say your parents are like, what's happening?
I'm like, I don't know. I just can order all my own movies now.
Yeah. So you knew tech was the route.
Tech. Yeah. And then after, I wanted to get into that space. So in consulting, I did some transportation work. I did some tech work. And then I knew I was going to come back to Seattle. When I was in the Bay Area, I was living in the Bay Area before I moved back to Seattle after college. Yeah. I joined a tech startup. I actually thought about starting my own back in 2007. I went and did about a couple months of research. I took 2 weeks of vacation from my job to go research some startup ideas that I had and in a network. And I just networked, meeting all these people in technology, wrote everyone's name down, tracked it, kind of maintained those relationships over the years. Even some of those helped with Convoy later. and ended up working at a startup in the Bay Area for about a year before I moved back to Seattle to start a family. And when I came back home to start a family, it was 2008. I had just taken a round the world trip with my then pregnant wife.
You guys traveled around the world and she was pregnant?
During her second trimester, yeah.
Oh, that's the coolest.
We decided to do that. I had enough points saved up that we could pay for 2 round the world tickets. And the doctor was like, yeah, this is a good time to go.
And how smart for you to just take advantage of that before launching everything.
So we did that. But then we got back to the United States and it was 2008. The economy had just collapsed when we were gone. We came back in late October and, I had left some money in the market that I had saved up over the last 5 years of working. That was gone. I hadn't been online. My bank was at Washington Mutual was out of business. The job that I'd been expecting to have when I got to Seattle was gone. So everything was gone. And I had to kind of reset. And I was really fortunate. A good friend of mine from college that I had actually introduced to Microsoft originally, I met up with him and he said, look, like, I think I might have an opportunity for you at Microsoft. Because I couldn't get an interview. I was meeting 6-7 people a day around Seattle and I could not get a single interview. I met with Amazon 6 times and everybody I could find, nobody was hiring back then. And so I got this one interview at Microsoft and I got the job. And I was really lucky to get a product management job in the end of 2008. And that kind of was necessary because I was about to start a family and I had nothing, I didn't have money at that point. And so that taught me a lot about.
I was about to say, like, how incredible to go through that. I've been recruiting through all of these crazy down markets. I was recruiting in the down market in New York, actually, when the financial crisis hit. But I've never been in a market where I was searching for a job and nobody will interview me.
Yeah.
Like that I think would make you an even better CEO. Like to have empathy for people that are going through the interview process. It's hard.
It is really hard. I remember, I graduated right after the tech bubble burst, and then I made this life transition in 2008. So I hit 2 times where I was looking for a new job when there weren't new jobs. And it definitely made me feel like I need to work hard to earn what I'm going to get. And I don't have a lot of, I guess, entitlement is the word, just because I just am so used to things not being there. I actually have a fear of like things. I think I have like it's
like in the underbelly of like how you operate.
Yeah, I have an exaggerated,
that could happen
like
again.
Almost an irrational fear now of like the market crashing. Like just because I've been through 2 of those, and I've been through periods when there was no jobs, and I think I try to talk to people about it sometimes now, and it's extremely hard for people to understand what it would be like if nobody was interviewing you, whereas now there's well,
it's so frothy right now. It's ridiculous.
But yeah, so I went through that, and that shaped me. And then I ended up, getting the job at Microsoft and continued in technology.
Yeah. So you're working in product management. You've had roles, kind of varied roles in product management and a little bit of biz dev across your career, correct?
That's right.
You're kind of one of these Swiss Army knives who seems like you've got a lot of skill sets. If you weren't a CEO right now, where would you be? Would you be in biz dev or would you be in product? Or like, where do you thrive?
I would probably either be in product, like a kind of maybe a cross-functional GM or product role. I think that's kind of where I thrive. Although in doing Convoy, I've learned how much I love and enjoy business development, partnership,
relationship building,
selling. I really enjoy it. I'm good at it. And I love being able to, convey a vision, an idea to someone, and then see them use it and benefit from it. And, there's nothing more rewarding than a customer talking about how valuable something is that you've been able to do for them, like, and how it helped them. Like, I think there's almost like that.
Well, I have to say, I watched a little video in preparing for today on your site, and I had chills. I was like moved by it. Like, you're really changing people's lives with Convoy, and I want to get to it. But I'm curious, after working for these 3 big, huge companies, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, which of those roles, I guess, set you up best for your role at Convoy, and what elements of the culture from those places did you take to say, this is kind of how I want to set the stage for the culture I want to build at Convoy?
Yeah, we took pieces from everywhere, to be honest. We left things behind and we took pieces. And one of the things that Grant and I talked about a lot in the early days is when you're founding a company, you're also going to be an employee of that company for a long time. You have to work there too, so let's make this a place we want to work. And what do we really like and not like? And so, for example, I thought Google did a really good job of like thinking about all the small details that made it lower friction to work there, like just little things. And it made it feel like it was a little bit more employee driven. So I remember a couple of things I really liked that we kind of took at one point were employees could give each other recognition awards. Like you could just give a peer award to someone. I thought that was really, really, you didn't have to go, it wasn't like my manager gives the award. It's that I can give it a peer award. I love that. Even little things like the way they did this is going to sound cheesy, but like the way they did
I'm writing it down. Actually, I like that a lot.
As mundane as the way Google did their conference rooms was using words in alphabetical order in a rotation around the office versus when I was at Microsoft and Amazon, it was like 17.425 was the conference code. And it was like, it felt like it was.
Oh, I've seen all sorts of cool stuff. We didn't implement, but I saw like, mountain ranges or just record labels or all sorts of cool stuff. I love that.
So I remember, other people have done that too, but I remember thinking, let's take that model. That model works really well. And then I love kind of the value system that Amazon has where they have a lot of different values. They use them in everything. And, we created our own set of values, but I kind of took the model of having a lot of values that you try to use them and bake them into your daily life at your company and like make them more than
including the interview loop and everything.
Exactly. And more than just a poster on the wall. That was kind of like, we like that, idea, or the idea of being, writing stuff down and really kind of being customer obsessed. Like that seemed like the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
I really liked the interview rigor that I learned for the first time at Microsoft. Like this idea of let's have really challenging interviews. Let's really like look beyond just the skill sets of the individual, like their exact skills to like, how do they think as an individual and how adaptable and resilient are they? And just these other things you challenge people on. I remember learning that at Microsoft. So there were just pieces that we learned in each of these companies. And you always want to, one of the values we created at Convoy is innovate deliberately, which means, your focus is a limited resource. And if you innovate everywhere, you will do worse. You will be a worse innovator in all of those places because you're spreading yourself thin. It's much better to pick the places where you can innovate and then give yourself full reign to copy best in class in areas where you shouldn't innovate. You shouldn't feel bad about copying best in class. And so when we were thinking about the culture, we were saying, there's certain areas we're going to want to innovate and have things that are just us, like where we're going to push these forward. And there's other things, let's just take pieces that have worked in other places that seemed really good.
Right. And interestingly, I think that that's important also because it's rewarded, right? Like come up, take a risk, bring an idea, it's celebrated. You're not going to fail. Like, I feel like at some of the bigger companies, it can be almost like you're prohibited from being innovative or from coming up with a new idea because the politics get in the way, or you're not like, somebody's not on board with what you're trying to implement. Whereas it's like Convoy feels like, even though you guys have grown so big, that it's still got that startup kind of energy of like, no, let's pivot. Let's come up with ideas. You're safe. So 2015 is when you launched this. How do you and Grant know each other? And how did you know? I think it's always scary to start a company with someone. Like, what about him made it feel like he was the right partner?
Yeah. Grant and I met each other at Amazon, actually. He joined, he had been running his own startup prior to joining Amazon, and Chris DeVore from Techstars introduced us. Michael Doherty was I worked for Michael Doherty at the time at Amazon. So there was a connection through Chris and et cetera. So we met Grant that way. And he was, Grant, one, just personality wise, is a fantastic person to spend time with. Like, I think he and I get along really well. It's obviously, hard building a company, but it's been really nice to have somebody that I feel like I can be completely open with. And, that was really positive. I think Grant also has so many incredible skills as a communicator. He relates really well to people. He has strong technical experience, and he was able to kind of build Convoy's technology and get it off the ground really fast. Like, he was fast at thinking about how to go and do that. And that was a really valuable partner to have in building Convoy.
Yeah.
And I figured he wasn't going to be able to do it because he had done other startups and he had just joined, he hadn't been at Amazon super long. But I was wrong and it worked out.
Yeah, it definitely worked out. And did you guys formalize anything as far as, hey, let's do an exercise in thinking through our work styles, or take a personality assessment, or talk about our goals and our lifestyle we're looking for, kind of like vetting for like, are we in it for the long haul together?
We didn't do it to the extent you just described, but we definitely talked about things like, what do we want to get out of this? What would be our goals in doing a startup? Is this a lifestyle business, or is this a, let's try to transform an industry business?
Yeah.
We had to get, like, those are pretty different, and you got to kind of decide what path you want to go down, because they're going to impact your life differently.
Completely. And your wives and your children.
Family. Yeah. And just like, exactly. And so, you know, and also just what roles we wanted to have. There wasn't a lot of debate. Like, he was like, hey, I want to work on the technology side, and you should work on as the CEO and kind of the cross-functional business side. And so that was actually pretty easy. You know, but it was something that we need to get clear.
Right.
And yeah.
And what was the original business idea, and how did you come up with the name Convoy?
The original idea is very similar to what Convoy is today. We had several different business ideas we were thinking about, but this one was effectively, you know, very similar. You know, we didn't understand the details of the industry at that time. We thought it'd be more local, kind of same day local, maybe straight truck delivery, smaller trucks. We didn't think about it as the heavy trucks from day one.
Yeah.
But that we quickly did. You know, a couple months in, we realized that was really where the opportunity was. So I'd say that honestly, we haven't had to pivot on the core.
But what was the idea? Like, you sat around one morning and were like, oh, I know, this is a gap. This is a huge market that nobody's thinking about. Like, how did you even come up with this idea?
Oh, got it. You know, the specific idea we ended up building was based on a bunch of research. Like, we started down, we were talking to investors, looking at different market opportunities. Trucking supply chain was an area of a lot of interest, both to us and to investors. And so then we went and did the hard work and went and met with a bunch of truck drivers, went to truck stops, walked into warehouses, you know, called a bunch of people we could find on LinkedIn, had 50, 60 conversations over a couple months. And that's where that's how we figured out actually where to start, was just a lot of conversations with people in the industry, asking them what they didn't like, what was broken, you know, starting with the customer and just working backwards from there. And that was the mentality we had about it. So it wasn't like an idea that just, this is what we should go do. It was based on lots of first person and online research to figure out where the problems were in the industry.
Yeah. And so for the listeners who don't know what Convoy does, what does Convoy do today? And what is the business model? How do you make money?
Yeah. So Convoy we provide trucking services today. And there are, you know, hundreds of thousands of mom and pop trucking companies with a few trucks, you know, 1 to 10 trucks out there. There are about 100,000 companies that ship truckloads of freight across the country. And total spend every year is near $1 trillion in terms of just trucking and truckload freight. In the middle, between that long tail of trucking companies and those shippers that want to move freight, there are about 15,000 intermediaries, freight brokers, that connect the dots and get a load from a shipper and go find a truck. Convoy is a digital freight network. So what we did is we built an app and a technology platform. So all of these long tail trucking companies can use the Convoy app and Convoy technology to get access and see all of this freight. And they can use that to find the best load for themselves, to book that load, to kind of run their small business. And they use the Convoy app to find jobs and kind of run their business. And, you know, that is how they're able to kind of support themselves. And Convoy's customers are, you know, big shippers like Procter & Gamble or Home Depot or, you know, Anheuser-Busch, who would hire Convoy to move their freight. And so then we put that freight into our app, into our marketplace, and truck drivers find it, and we create the market for them, and then we're responsible for the freight being delivered. And so that's kind of how we started. And now we're building additional businesses that really help truck drivers be successful as trucking companies, We're allowing third parties, other brokers, other companies in trucking to kind of run on the Convoy platform now. So we're kind of really opening up as we built scale with this. But at the end of the day, it's a service that lets people move freight.
Yeah. And what's the business model?
We make a spread between the buy and the sell. And so if somebody comes to us and says, I have a job, we can do it for $1,000. Convoy goes and finds a truck that will do it for less than $1,000, and we make that spread.
Okay, awesome. Very cool. And, when I told you I think it was before we even started recording, but I got introduced to you early on from a friend. And when I went in for that very first meeting to talk to you guys about what you were building, I just remember being like, holy shit, when I saw who some of the, where the money was coming from as far as your investors. You've got some big names. Who was the first big name to get on board? And who was your first call as far as like, who do you go to when you're talking about fundraising and investing in your startup? Like, where did you even start? How did you know?
When I got started with Convoy?
Yeah. Like, we all have a few people in our network. Like, who's your person that you called first? So you mentioned Chris DeVore as a person who's a great connector.
Yeah.
But I guess, where did that first check come from?
Yeah.
And what about the first big name check? Names like Bill Gates, names like Jeff Bezos and Mark Benioff.
Yeah. So when we were first starting, I'm trying to remember all the people we reached out to. I remember we talked to some folks at Madrona in the very early, before we had started. Mavron was extremely helpful. They don't do B2B, but they were super helpful. Chris DeVore and Hadi and Ali Partovi, the Partovi brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ended up happening was, at that time, like, we were so early. We were thinking about several different ideas. And I talked to the people I just mentioned, and Mavron let me just camp out in their office for a little while to kind of like think about what I was going to work on next. I didn't know I was going to do Convoy at that point. That was super helpful. Dan Leviton, Jason,
Stouffer.
Yeah, exactly. And that was very helpful. And then Chris, later on, once we decided we were going to do something B2B, like, it didn't make sense with Mavron at that time, but Chris was like, hey, come camp out in our space up at, the Techstars space. Grant Goodale, my co-founder, had known him well from before. So we kind of camped out there for a while. And I think at that point, the ideas just weren't far enough along for Madrona. And when we went to go raise our first seed round, at that time, I think Techstars had a conflict with another company in Seattle. There's another trucking company they were involved in, so they couldn't get involved.
I'm like,
yeah, there was something else. And we ended up, and during this whole time, Hadi in particular, but Hadi and Ali had been really helpful as well. And so they had kind of like really pushed me to go deeper in supply chain and look at opportunities there. And then once we kind of crystallized around doing something in trucking, they were the first money in. And they kind of said, hey, we see the potential here. We think you guys have a good starting group. We really like the space.
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw Hadi has a board seat also, which is amazing.
Yeah. They'd been coaching, kind of helping us think through this along the way. So several people that I mentioned were really helpful. The Seattle ecosystem was really helpful. People stepped up and got behind us. But, in terms of the first check, it was Hadi and Ali, but they were kind of, when I say first check, they kind of committed initially, but then they also opened up and gave us, we brought in some people from our network, but they brought in a lot of people and introduced me and Grant to a lot of people in their network, which included some of the folks you mentioned, like Bezos and Mark Benioff. So we did a seed round with them, plus a lot of really strong investors. And honestly, the thesis at that point was, especially once I started to raise money, I realized in my business, the thing that really mattered to my customers, which are shippers, manufacturers, companies that are doing very traditional businesses, they care a lot about trust. They want to know we're going to be there tomorrow, and they want to know some real people behind this company. And so they weren't interested in Silicon Valley names. Like, they don't know, not picking out Silicon Valley names, but just like there's a lot of angel investors and other well-known tech investors that mainstream businesses don't know. But we were able to, so we pivoted a little bit and we raised money from a lot of companies, a lot of founders who had started name brand, companies that would be known by them. So that when they asked us who were our investors, we could name people that were running companies that they would recognize.
That makes sense.
And that made a huge difference. They were like, oh, okay, at least some of the names you're saying, I know those people. I've heard about them in the news. I know their companies.
Yeah.
They're big brand companies now. So that gives me a little bit of confidence. Just those little things in the early days make a huge difference, because when you're just getting out the gate and you're selling to a business, it's not just whether or not the thing you're offering sounds good. It's, are you going to be here in 6 months?
Right. And now at this point, 675.5 million. Did I read that right? That's how much you've raised?
Yeah.
And with a $2.7 billion valuation. It's crazy. I mean, when you hear that, are you just like, oh yeah, this is how I live. This is just my world I'm in now. Or do you kind of trip out? Like it's crazy what you've built. I hope you're taking it in and feeling just pride. And
it is crazy. From that perspective, I definitely feel, I mean, like I said, when I was a kid, I wanted to start a tech company. I knew that someday I wanted to try it. And it took me a long time. I tried it when I was in my mid-20s. I went pretty deep looking at opportunities. I didn't do it then. I waited 10 years and did it later. But I knew I wanted to. So that's the part that honestly gets me. Like, I'm just like, it's like exciting that I had this thing.
I mean, they're starting a tech company, and then there's the size and magnitude and just sheer scale of what you're running and building. I'm guessing that you just deal with pressure really well. How do you compartmentalize your life and be such a great dad and show up and play basketball and like have great friendships and have a great culture? How are you doing all that?
So yeah. And I will say, as it gets bigger, it is more pressure. Like, there's more at stake. The visibility is much greater, but the opportunity is also much greater, and the impact in the world is much greater. So those things kind of fuel each other, to be honest. I think in terms of staying balanced, it can be really hard. I do have a pretty strong optimistic streak, and I don't get rattled super easily, which can be, good and bad, I guess, in some ways. COVID's been challenging. Like, before COVID, I got separated, actually. So like during COVID, being a single dad was a lot. You can imagine COVID hitting, locking everything down, having, raising 2 girls and like just kind of managing through that. So that was a lot of work. And I learned a lot about myself. And I also realized that, I think in some ways the time with family and less travel and just kind of being able to focus on, fewer things and having a little more time from that was really valuable. And I think in some ways, that helped me kind of balance all those things, was having a year or two to really focus on Convoy, myself and my kids.
And your kids.
And I have an incredible foundation with my broader family, which is super valuable. And so,
well, I'm sorry to hear that. I did not know that, but I also know that it's disproportionately common among entrepreneurs, because it's just and then this is another child, this is your baby. And look what you've built, and it's a lot to go through. I'm curious, when you're playing, I don't know if you and the kids play like roses and thorns or highs and lows, or when you're sharing about your week in the moments of watching movies and playing basketball, what would your update be this week? What was the best part of this week and the worst part as far as Convoy?
I get my energy. So there's 2 things that gave me energy in the last couple of weeks. One was I did an offsite with my leadership team, and we hadn't done a 2-day kind of offsite in a long time. And it's an incredible group. Everybody's all in, no one's walking on eggshells. Everyone's learning about each other and pushing. And that, I love the group that I get to work with. I love the people at Convoy.
And are you leading that, or do you have a moderator come in?
For some of the things we did, we had a moderator help with it. And then we did it, just ourselves after that.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's amazing.
And, every quarter we get together as a group and spend time together. But just people at Convoy, that is the story of Convoy. One of the things we wanted to when we started this company was to make it a story, and we wanted people to feel like they're part of the story. And so we have a weekly all hands meeting every week, because it's the only way you can really keep everybody connected to the story of the company and what's happening. And so, that matters. That fuels me a lot. And it's customers. Honestly, I told people that this week. I was like asking myself this question actually about a week ago. I'm like, when things are hard, where do I get my energy from? And I realized whenever I get on the phone with a customer,
it's like a little bump, right?
It's such a bump. They're so excited.
It's so good. I know. That's how I feel. I'm like, when I get to talk to clients who are happy and candidates, and you feel like you're changing people's lives, it's the coolest.
Yeah.
And when I'm like reading a document or something I'm not good at that. Like sitting and reading like a legal document, I'm like, this is horrible for me.
Yeah. And even if the call isn't, even if they're not happy.
No, even of course, but if you feel that you could shape the story at the end of it. I was actually listening when you said that you wanted to be like a storyteller through movies. I was like, kind of that's what you're doing when you're fundraising and pitching the business or pitching the opportunity to come work at Convoy. It's all part of selling a story and telling a story.
One of the things that I didn't know until I did this is, being a founder and creating something, like, even though it's business and tech, and this is kind of obvious in hindsight, it's very creative. It's a very creative process. And so I feel like I was really fortunate in that I was able to scratch that itch and like be able to feel very creative about how to build the culture in the company.
Yeah.
And have that opportunity through business. Like I was able to get that too. It wasn't just like,
right.
Tech is there.
Well, it's a part of the story that I was excited to see is that you have a female CTO. Like, I mean, so many companies are begging me for female engineers. And oftentimes I'm advising them on like, especially the early stage companies, I'm like, start early because it's really hard when you have 30 male, engineers to then attract a female engineer. But having a female CTO is like a whole nother level, especially at your scale.
Yeah,
was that something really intentional and deliberate? And how has that impacted your ability to recruit a diverse slate of engineering candidates?
So it has definitely helped us be able to recruit a more diverse slate of engineering candidates. And I think, one of the reasons diversity is so important for every company is that the more you can have representation in leadership levels at a company, people do want to come work for people that they can relate to. Like that's normal. Yes. That's normal human behavior. And so it's important for us to do that. We can do so much better there as a company. But that was a really important hire. Dorothy is somebody I actually met at Amazon. So I've known her for quite a long time. And we had stayed in touch over the years. And, every leadership search we run has a really strong component focused on diversity. Like when we start the search, we tend to put a lot of energy into ensuring that there's a really diverse slate of candidates, not just like making sure there's a couple, like making sure basically, starting where that is the overwhelming focus and then narrowing back from there. And that kind of leads to, at the end of the search, typically a diverse set of options to like go through the process with. And that's really important, I think. If you don't.
Yeah, super important. And are you guys remote right now? Or are you in person or a hybrid model?
We're mostly remote, but it's hybrid. I think it's going to, there was a period where a lot of people were coming back to the office for a while and then Omicron hit. So I think it'll probably come back as well. Yeah. But anyway, getting the group together makes a big difference. We are pretty deliberate about how we think about leadership hiring. Dorothy is just an incredible partner in all aspects. And I think, diversity.
I was impressed with her background.
Great hire.
The question about remote was intentional around like being able to recruit a diverse slate of candidates, because sometimes you get limited by the geography that you're recruiting out of. And so a lot of companies that have been like, we would love candidates that are in Seattle, but we're also open to hybrid model or someone who's remote and maybe could come in once a quarter. Are seeing a wider range of candidates that they're able to look at, because there's candidates all over the country or even all over the world versus just Seattle, which doesn't have a ton of diversity by definition.
Totally. We're more open to it now at the leadership level. We were not as open to it before at the leadership level. We felt like it would be, there's a whole bunch of risks that go along with that. But in today's world and how we believe that the future is going to look, it's less of an issue.
And the pandemic and this period of time has been net positive to the business?
I would say it's been neutral. We weren't one of the companies, like there are some companies where it was obviously positive. So we weren't on the extreme where like our business got shut down. it wasn't also like where all the competition got shut down, which is what happened in some cases. Like if you were the one running the online thing, then it worked pretty well. And if you were the in-person, it didn't.
Right.
We were kind of in the middle. Trucking continued as it had been. And the volatility in the market, because of the way we price and we have contracts with our customers, the extreme price volatility and inflation and kind of like rapidly changing landscape for trucking added pressure to keep up with that and kind of manage our customers and contracts through that, since it was changing a lot. So I'd say it was neutral in that, like, there were some positives because there was additional demand, volumes went up and things like that as we've seen people buy more stuff. But just the overhead of kind of managing our customers through a really challenging period for them has created a lot of pressure on the business as well.
That doesn't surprise me at all. And where do you see the business going in the next 3 to 5 years? Like you said, just some new business lines maybe, or is it just keep growing? I know that you guys were like kind of first movers in the space and now there's some competition. Like, what will success look like, I guess, if you look back in 2027?
I think success for us, we talk about the mission of endless capacity and zero waste and kind of realizing the potential of the opportunity. This is a huge market. There's a huge amount of potential for us to create efficiency, reduce waste, make the business more transparent, and like change the quality of service that both carriers and shippers have, the way they experience trucking, like just the bar for their experience. And so I think success for us would be in 4 years or 4 or 5 years, the way that people think about trucking as a solution and something that they depend on is totally different, because the quality of their experience has gone up so much. It takes so much less overhead and so much less work for them to kind of manage it. It just works really seamlessly and cleanly. And the participants feel like it's transparent, fair, and and it's functioning really well versus today doesn't feel like that. And I think if we do that really well, the growth just happens. Like if we're succeeding in solving these problems for customers, then I think so. It is about just really continuing to grow and expand. It's a massive market,
right?
Our first party business, and also then allowing every other broker and trucking company in the country to run on the Convoy platform, I think is going to be a big part of our growth over the next 4 or 5 years as well, where we've built this incredible technology platform that even our competition can use today and run their business on.
Yeah. I would imagine that your business is one of those, like, if they don't know, then they don't know. And once they know, they're never leaving. Like once they get on the platform, they're never going to leave. But you also have to, the acquisition of those customers is all that needs to be the focus. Like, how do we get them? And then they're never going to go anywhere else because it makes their life so much better.
Exactly. And in some cases, that's 100% the case today. And we need to build to the scale that's the case for every customer we have. Yeah.
Well, I'm in awe of you. My final question is, what fuels you?
It's my family and just the constant feeling that we can do big, important things that make the world better. Like, honestly, this is the optimism around like this can make a difference, and that it's like, and my family every day is what fuels me.